But like I said, I'm excited to have everyone on the call today and to be able to talk about connected data and connected campaigns as it relates to e-commerce, and especially how that impacts web push. Before we jump in, I want to introduce myself. My name is Ryan King. I'm the Director of Demand Generation here at Blueshift. Blueshift is the maker of the SmartHub CDP, and which is a platform that gives marketers access to their connected data, to AI, and the ability to orchestrate campaigns all in one place, which allows you to create personalized customer experiences. I'm joined today by Brian Starr. So we've got the Ryan and Brian show from One Signal. And Brian, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, folks. Very excited to talk to everyone today. My name is Brian Starr. I've been working in the kind of digital marketing and multi-channel communication space for a few years, most recently at One Signal. And I'm excited to talk about how One Signal and Blueshift go together, especially as it relates to kind of web push and e-commerce.
Awesome. Well, excited to have you here. So in order for us to get kicked off and to make sure that we're all on the same page, I think it's important to start with what is connected data and how do we think about it? What does it actually mean? Brian, I know you're talking to e-commerce customers every day. When you hear them talk about connected data, what do they typically mean when they say that?
Typically, when I hear connected data, it's one of two things. So typically it's either kind of as it relates to transactional behavior. So kind of connected data as it relates to kind of updating users about shipping or in stock. And then the other side of the coin is kind of marketing and promoting certain things to users, depending on what is perceived to be most relevant to them.
Yeah, I think there's always the aspiration in the conversations I have of connected data for that ability. And I think one of the pieces that's interesting is how people think of what a point of accomplishment they're at, for lack of a better word. So connected data being near real time, seamless connections versus imports, exports, and really the ability there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, web push is kind of an emerging technology. And it's interesting, a lot of the folks that we talk to who are exploring web push are really kind of coming from an email background. So they're potentially more used to kind of managing lists and kind of static, collections of users. And when we think about connected data, we're really thinking about kind of dynamic segments where users are entering or exiting and kind of triggering things based on live, active connected data.
Yeah, absolutely. When in the digital world we're in today, it's if the data doesn't come in until tomorrow through an import export, we miss the boat if we don't get to take advantage of it while they're in that session.
Exactly. And the other side of this, where I'm sure you can speak to in more detail, is kind of connecting with tools, whether backend or third party, that can make kind of product recommendations and things like that. So that's kind of where our products kind of intersect.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we think about that being the desired state, it's important also to look at what some of the barriers are to getting to that state. When we look back as recently as 2017, marketers on average were using 10 data sources, and today they're using over 16. My hypothesis on this is the 16 is actually limited by our capacity as marketers to be able to go and get those data, not limited by the number of places where we want to get data from. There's data all over the organization, and being able to pull all of that data into the same place has gotten to where if you're still trying to leverage import export, or if you don't have that automated connection, it gets really difficult to manage. So that's kind of the what of connected data, but it's also important to answer the question of why. Why is connected data so important? Why are we pursuing that? And I've got a few stats that for those of you like me who like to have the data component behind why we're doing things. One of them is that marketers see an increase of 20% in sales when they use personalized experiences. And personalization is really the end game. That ability to leverage the data that you have in one place with one view of the customer so that you can create a personalized experience for them has an impact on the bottom line. 77% of customers have chosen, recommended, or even paid more for brands that provide that personalized experience. And over half of customers expect personalized experiences. While those are industry statistics, they're not just academic statistics. Carparts.com, which is a Blue Shift customer, saw a 400% lift in their customer engagement when they started using personalized experiences based off of their data. Tradera, who's an online marketplace in Sweden, and also what works with Blue Shift, saw their sales increase 131% when they started using personalized recommendations. So personalization has a material impact on your ability as a marketer to drive increased revenue and impact your bottom line. And when we talk about personalized experiences, what we mean is the ability to, at scale, customize and personalize how someone is interacting with your brand based on the information that you have about them. So if we use this example here, we have our profile of Eric. It's being fed by all of our different data sources, our data warehouse, those real-time events, how he's interacting with the site. Based on having that information and being able to run it through some AI and predictive intelligence, we're able to start to identify things like how likely is Eric to purchase, so that we can customize the experience that he has and prioritize how we want to approach him. We also can understand, based off of his engagement and his purchase history and his interactions with our brand, what products should we be recommending? Should we lead with, in this case, the hoodie over the watch, because we've seen Eric either purchase a watch recently, and so he's looking to do something else, or we've seen him shopping for different types of apparel. It also can identify when to send or when to engage with someone and on what channel they're most likely to engage. It's almost like having a secret playbook to be able to go after your customers and say, this is exactly, I know where they're going to be, when they're going to be there, and what they're most interested in, so that you can improve the likelihood of transaction. All of that allows you to create that one-on-one personalized campaign at scale across all of your customer experiences. And this is something where, when you have all of those data connections in place, you can continuously learn, continuously improve. So with that in mind, and the idea of creating these personalized experiences, let's talk about how that impacts web push. So Brian, can you kick us off with how you define web push and how that channel is leveraged?
Yeah, important question to answer before we dive into the mechanics of it. It's interesting. A lot of folks confuse web push with kind of pop-up messages, and I just wanted to kind of just be very clear about how web push differs from those other tools, and even differs from mobile. So when it comes to web push, you can almost treat web push, a browser using web push, as a device. So essentially, Firefox has their own service for push, Chrome, Safari, and just about every browser at this point has their own message delivery service. And essentially what OneSignal does is help you optimize and get more folks to opt in through those channels and through those browsers. And then by integrating with a tool like Blue Shift, we can actually start to customize and really drive the relevance of what you're sending to your users. Now, I'll have a more in-depth use case or example of a customer towards the end of our discussion today. But one of the things that I think is just important to bring up as a best practice in general is that if your push notifications, whether they're web or mobile, serve no other purpose than to remind your customer that your website exists, then you're probably going to have that user churn with time. So one of the ways that we can really improve this and improve the experience, the open rate, et cetera, is by personalizing those messages and also kind of limiting and targeting the messages or the users that you're sending messages to. So as an example, I might want to use different data in OneSignal to kind of filter by users that are in certain countries, as an example, or on certain devices. But I might also want to take data that's coming out of Blue Shift and use that to basically personalize the name of a recommended product, or even do things like bring in the name of the first item in an abandoned cart. So hopefully you're starting to see by now that by using Blue Shift with one signal, we can kind of take all the magic that they're doing in the back end, identifying and potentially flagging different users as maybe likely to churn or likely to purchase. And then once those are set up and sent over to us, you can actually leverage those right within our platform. And most importantly, this is something that is not going to require separate development work for creating these campaigns. These are basically things that any non-technical person can set up.
Yeah, that's really cool. The idea and the concept of bringing in some of those personalization elements. And I really like the point you made around doing more than just reminding somebody that your website exists. Because I feel like that's a lot of the web push notifications that I get popping up from time to time. But the ones that stand out are the ones that do that personalization. What are some of the other use cases, or how do you think about web push and where you could leverage that personalization beyond just reminding someone that the website exists? I know abandoned cart comes to mind, but like what else is out there?
Yeah, another great use case that a lot of retailers seem to overlook is, and it's funny, a lot of retailers actually have this in place with email already. But being able to set up a back in stock automated alert that pops up when an out of stock item comes back into stock is super helpful. So, I know myself, like sometimes I'll go to websites and find that an item isn't in stock. And then, before I can click away, there will be kind of a pop-up that'll appear and ask me if I want to receive an email. Now, email and web push are actually somewhat similar in that they both require a very low barrier for entry. And basically what that really translates to is that nobody has to download an app or opt into push notifications outside of the browser or sharing their email address. So that actually makes those two channels perfect for this kind of interaction, because in this case, the user might not have an account set up. We might basically be dealing with kind of a semi-anonymous user that's just kind of browsing. And basically by notifying them and allowing them or giving them a reason to opt in to push, in this case for back in stock alerts, you'll see a dramatically higher opt-in rate. And then, of course, people will stay opted in because you're actually delivering the types of messages that you want to deliver. Something else that we offer that is actually built into our platform that I won't go over in too much detail today is we actually allow a code-free way of asking your users specifically what they're interested in and letting them check or uncheck different boxes when they're opting in to push. So I like to use an example where there are different categories of messages. Somebody can actually uncheck the kind of new offers box within that interface. And that actually serves two functions. It tells us as marketers that this person doesn't just want to receive offer messages. And it also helps encourage that user to feel more comfortable opting in because they're thinking to themselves, okay, I actually unchecked that box for spammy messages or offers. I feel much better about opting in because I'm only getting messages about what I've said I want to hear about.
Yeah, that's a great idea and a cool functionality, because I really like the piece around thinking about web push as the almost the same access or a very similar access as you mentioned to email, but for those people who want to remain semi-anonymous, and getting the ability to message to them in a way that's still personalized without requiring you to have their email address.
Exactly.
That's
We've been
fantastic.
kind of thinking of both of those channels as kind of like top of the funnel channels before we can kind of get them deeper into the product and download the app.
Yeah, fantastic. Tell me a little bit about how and you've alluded to this already, but how you think about and leverage those data components with web push to make it, even better, whether it's you're building segments and pushing that, pushing a message to a specific segment, or how web push fits into that overall omni-channel experience.
Yeah, so OneSignal actually works pretty seamlessly across mobile and web. We actually think of push kind of holistically across both of those platforms, and we even have kind of a unified interface for that. Um, Outside of personalizing the individual messages you're sending for each user, one of the things that we've seen tend to really improve open rates and subsequent uh, outcomes is really getting a bit more specific, or a lot more specific, with which segments of users you're messaging. So, perfect example of a blue shift type of segment that I'd want to pull into OneSignal and kind of set up for more messaging would be, say, those users who are kind of on the cusp of making a purchase. Um, Now, on the other side, we can also kind of set this up so that our users who are maybe at risk of churn maybe get less messages than some of our other users. So essentially, we can kind of flag and update these users entirely through Blue Shift. And then within OneSignal, if there's other data that's available to OneSignal or coming in from your backend, you can even take it a step further and segment even further than that.
Very cool. So it's really that, going back to the connected data piece, we're not talking about days or weeks to get the data from one system to the other. It's being able to uh, leverage that
Definitely.
data dynamically.
Yeah, and we really think in terms of kind of the who, what, and when. So who we're targeting would be our segments. So wherever they're coming from, that's super important. The what is the message content. So what are we actually sending and personalizing? And then we do offer some controls on our side around the when of when messages get sent. That'll kind of allow us to kind of tailor and optimize on a per user basis.
Excellent. And you mentioned some examples of impacts this is having with customers. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, perfect timing. So this is an example of a customer, and we actually have a more detailed write-up on this specific customer story. But we work with a lot of agencies that build e-commerce tools and platforms for companies. And one of those agencies we work with is called Mute6. And specifically, they brought us in to work with a company called Inspire Uplift, which is kind of like almost like an Etsy-like peer-to-peer shop. So kind of like a retail focus, but still on the web. And they actually were already using web push notifications previously with another provider, but what they weren't doing was doing much of any personalizing at all. So they didn't have a personalized dropdown that would allow users to select what they wanted to use. They weren't pulling in relevant information for users' messages, and they weren't doing things like automating things like abandoned cart flows. Now, once they actually implemented a live active abandoned cart flow and cart reminder, they told us that actually 10% of their overall sales today can be attributed back to those specific messages. So it's not even so much about in this case reminding someone that the app exists, but maybe reminding them that, hey, you still might want this thing that you might have forgotten about. And in that case, that can actually be really helpful. It's just kind of all about relevance and kind of conveying to your end customer that you understand where they are in their overall journey through your product.
Yeah, that concept of being helpful can make such a big difference in the effectiveness of marketing campaigns and messages. If as marketers we put on our hats of how do we help our customers get to the information or to the product they're looking for, um, my experience says that if you do that, then the rest of it kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, and going back to the kind of personalized messaging and timing, once Inspire actually started leveraging personalization and really taking advantage of some of the automated tools that we offer, we actually saw, or they actually saw a surge in over 200% of their previous open rate for their messages. So,
Wow.
relevance, timing, and the actual content itself, if it's the right mixture of those things for the right user, can make a huge impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, so as you can see, as we've kind of walked through this, I think we've talked about how connected data allows marketers to create those personalized experiences, and then also just the overall impact that personalization has within each touch point, but especially within web push. So Brian, thanks for sharing your expertise around that. And I want to open it up and see if we have any questions that have come in while we've been talking. And it looks like we've had a couple come in. If there's more, feel free to chat those in or add them to the Q&A box. The first one is, can you use OneSignal if you don't have a CDP? So Brian, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, we have plenty of customers that use OneSignal without a dedicated CDP. So OneSignal, we don't really position ourselves as a CDP per se, but you can still use OneSignal like a CDP. So essentially, we're tracking data as soon as the SDK is installed around session data, device type, all sorts of data that you can basically bring into OneSignal. And then at that point, again, we're not necessarily a proper CDP, but you can still use that data to enrich and target and time the messages you're sending.
Yeah. The next one is, you referred to BlueShift as a SmartHub CDP. Is that different from a regular CDP, or is it something else entirely? So I'll take that one. That is a common question. There are a lot of CDPs that are in the market. And so Gartner has actually created categories of CDPs, with SmartHub being one of those categories, and the category that best describes BlueShift. A SmartHub CDP is a CDP that connects data, provides AI, and allows campaign orchestration all within a single platform. So while other CDPs may collect data, a SmartHub CDP allows you to collect data and keep it extremely close to your campaigns, and allow you to create that personalization and leverage that data within a single system. So that's kind of the difference there. And if you have additional questions, happy to chat through those. We also had one come in, what are web push personalization best practices that you would recommend? And Brian, I'll let you take that.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, what are web push personalization best practices that you would recommend?
Yeah, so certainly at the top of my list would be using our custom slide down prompt. So essentially that kind of allows you to let your users have more control over what types of categories of messages they're opting into. Another really important kind of quirk of using prompts and trying to get more folks to opt in is that you're definitely best off kind of delaying that prompt from appearing until later in a session. So you can think of the timing of those prompts or when they show up is almost as important as the type of prompt you're using. So you think of it this way, we actually have our SDK set up so that at any time after any action, one of your users can inadvertently trigger the system to fire. So essentially we can kind of time that so that after, say, a user makes an order, maybe we take that as an opportunity to prompt the user and say, hey, we can send you a push to give you shipping updates and that kind of thing. So giving the user a good reason to opt in and timing it to where that makes sense is a really, really great way to make sure that you're actually getting folks opting in instead of just ignoring it.
Very cool. So I think from a question, a timing standpoint, I think that's about it for today. It does look like there might be one or two more questions, but want to make sure we are respectful of time, and we'll follow up with answers to those if we didn't get to your question. So apologies for that, and apologies for the technical delays at the beginning, but appreciate your patience. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today and chatting through this. It's been a great conversation. And thanks to everyone who attended as well. If you have additional questions, definitely feel free to reach out to BlueShift or to OneSignal, and we would be happy to help with any of those questions you have around connecting data or connecting or leveraging web push notifications. So thanks so much, and hope everyone has a fantastic day.